The crackling fire and the smell of strong, bitter coffee in Isaiah's cabin offered a sliver of normalcy in a world irrevocably changed. Alice slumped in a worn armchair, her body aching, her mind a relentless loop of the night's horrors. Yet, the exhaustion was secondary to the grim determination burning within her. Sarah huddled on the floor, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, her eyes wide and vacant. The volunteers huddled together, casting nervous glances at Jaden, who sat cross-legged near the fire, his tattooed form illuminated by the dancing flames. Isaiah, his weathered face grim, surveyed the scene. He moved with the cautious energy of a man walking a tightrope, caught between the knowledge that had burdened him for years and the weight of the decisions he now faced. "So," the deputy finally began, his voice hoarse, "we just gonna ignore the elephant in the room?" He didn't use the word creature, monster, or anything remotely resembling the nightmarish form he'd witnessed. But his meaning was clear. Alice braced herself. This was the moment she knew was coming, the clash between her rational world and the chilling truth. "The book," she said, her voice steady. She held up the ancient, brittle tome. "The ritual it describes. It won't defeat that thing, but it might weaken it, might give us a fighting chance." The deputy stared at her as though she'd sprouted horns. "Ritual? A fighting chance against?" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely towards the woods where unspeakable terrors lurked. Isaiah cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "The old stories," he began, his voice a low rumble. "They speak of ways to bind Naraka. It can't be killed, maybe, but it can be sent back to where it came from. And you just happen to have a handy guidebook on how to?" One of the volunteers, a young brash officer Ellis vaguely recognized, scoffed. Ellis flinched at the officer's dismissive tone, but her exhaustion had been replaced with a cold fury born of necessity. She met his gaze head-on, the weight of the last few hours pressing down on her. "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do," she retorted. Her voice was sharp, fueled by desperation. "And if you have a better plan for dealing with the thing that tore a school bus apart like a tin can and slaughtered those children, feel free to share it." Silence descended upon the cabin, broken only by the crackling fire. She felt Sarah huddle closer to her, seeking comfort. There was fear in the eyes of the volunteers, but also a flicker of defiance. They'd seen the monster, witnessed its brutality. The truth, however horrifying, was impossible to deny anymore. Isaiah took a deep breath, his weathered hand resting lightly on the faded cover of the book. "The old tales, they ain't something you wanna believe," he warned, his voice thick with a lifetime of secrets finally spilling out. "The last bindin'. It cost my grandfather his life, and another, something far worse." A chill ran down Alice's spine. The ritual, this desperate solution, was already exacting a terrible price. "Worse than what we faced last night?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "There are hungers older than time," Isaiah murmured, "ones that sleep lightly and shouldn't never be woken. The ritual, it ain't just about strength of arms. It's about what you're willing to offer. What, or who, you're prepared to lose." His gaze settled on Jaden, who stared back unflinchingly, his tattooed skin stark in the flickering firelight. The air in the cabin felt thick, heavy with the unspoken. Ellis scanned the faces of the survivors, the hardened men and women who'd witnessed the horror firsthand. Each wore an uneasy mix of terror and grim determination. They'd tasted the true power of Naraka, and none were eager to repeat the experience. "Details," the deputy grunted, his voice gruff but filled with a new note of begrudging respect. "We need to know what the hell we're getting into." Ellis opened the book, the faded pages filled with crude sketches and unsettling symbols. She turned to a specific passage, the words blurring slightly before her tired eyes. "The vessel," she began, her voice wavering. "It needs to be someone marked by Naraka, someone connected to it." She forced herself to continue, to translate the archaic descriptions. The ritual required a binding circle, a sacrifice to draw the creature in, but not of blood alone. It demanded a fragment of its essence, a beacon to lure it into the trap. A collective gasp filled the cabin as understanding dawned. All eyes turned to Jaden, the fear palpable. He was not merely a victim, but a terrifyingly vital part of their desperate, impossible plan. The silence in the cabin stretched long, broken only by the relentless ticking of the old clock on the mantel. The warmth of the fire no longer offered comfort, merely highlighted the coldness of the plan forming before them. Ellis held her breath, waiting for Jaden's reaction. He stared into the flames, his face a mask of stoic determination. She couldn't help but recall the monstrous figure in the mist, the crimson eyes fixated on him with a predatory hunger. "The tattoos," he said, his young voice surprisingly steady. "That night, in the ruins, I saw it. Not clearly, but it left a mark on me." The words hung in the air, a chilling confirmation of their worst fears. Isaiah closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a line down his weathered cheek. "It's like the old stories say," he rasped. "Naraka seeks something, a way of seeing into this world, marking those it favors." Fury and an icy wave of determination warred within Ellis. This innocent boy was not merely a victim, but a key, perhaps the only key to stopping the creature. The weight of the decision they were making pressed down on her, a suffocating burden. "Explain," she pressed, forcing her voice to remain level. "The ritual, how are the tattoos connected?" Isaiah took a deep, shuddering breath. "The old binders, they weren't just hunters. They found those marked by the darkness, drew him in." He hesitated, and for the first time since they'd met, Ellis saw unmasked fear in his eyes. They turned the creature's hunger against itself. "The mark, it acts as a beacon, draws its notice. And the vessel?" Ellis prompted, the words catching in her throat. Isaiah's gaze shifted to Jaden. "They become a part of it, just enough for the ritual to hold, to bind the rest back in the shadows." The cabin seemed to tilt. Jaden was just a child. Yet, the monstrous markings across his skin now took on a terrifying new significance. "How much? How much of him?" Ellis's voice cracked. Isaiah averted his eyes, shame burning in their depths. "More than flesh," he muttered. "Soul stuff, the stories say. Those that became vessels. They were never the same, if they survived at all." Dread settled over Ellis, a leaden weight in her chest. The ritual offered a potential solution, but at an unimaginable price. They were asking a child to sacrifice not just his body, but a part of his very essence to stop a monster. But in the face of Naraka's hunger, was there truly a choice? The weight of their decision hung heavy in the air, the desperate need for action warring with the terrifying price the ritual demanded. Yet, the memory of Emily's lifeless body, of Sarah's haunted gaze, fueled a defiant resolve within Ellis. She wouldn't stand by and let others suffer, they had to fight back. "The preparations," she said, pushing the moral dilemmas aside for the moment. "Survival demanded focus." "What specifically does the ritual require?" Isaiah nodded grimly, the shift towards pragmatism steadying him. "The book. It's less a guide, more a collection of warnings," he rasped. "There's pieces missing, passed down through whispers instead of written." He held up the ancient text, tracing a crude sketch of concentric circles with a trembling finger. "A binding site, that's the key. Old tales say Naraka was held once here, long ago. There's a place, by the waterfall where the old mill used to stand." He hesitated, and in the flickering firelight, his eyes seemed to age centuries. "And something else," he continued, his voice low. "Something powerful. The binders used the bones of its kin, shattered remnants from when one of the old gods cast it down. That's what truly draws it in, compels it to obey." Ellis felt her stomach turn. Bones of its kin. The implications were horrific. "Do we know where to find those?" A bitter laugh escaped Isaiah's lips. "If the stories hold truth, there'll be remains where the last binding took place. It ain't a place anyone goes willingly, Sheriff." His voice softened, tinged with sympathy. "Sarah's seen enough for one lifetime. A flicker of doubt crossed Ellis's face. This plan, this desperate gamble, rested on the shaky foundation of folktales and horrifying sacrifices. The weight of those consequences threatened to break her. But before she could spiral further, the deputy spoke up, his brashness tempered by a newfound grim determination. "I know the woods," he said, a fire of his own burning in his eyes. "I can take a team in, try to locate this place." Jaden straightened, the tattoos on his skin pulsing faintly in the firelight. "I can guide you," he offered, his voice firm. "The creature, it marked me. I can feel its pull." Ellis watched the boy, a mix of admiration and unease warring within her. He was the heart of this impossible plan, both their greatest hope and the most vulnerable among them. She turned back to the book, flipping through its brittle pages. "According to this, the timing is crucial," she said, her voice regaining its commanding tone. "Lunar cycles, alignment of specific stars." She glanced at the clock on the mantel. "We don't have much time." As they pored over the archaic instructions, a desperate, reckless plan started to take shape. It was a dance with a monstrous entity, a game where every step risked unimaginable consequences. But with Naraka's shadow looming over their small town, it was the only game left to play. A flicker of firelight danced across Jaden's tear-streaked face, illuminating the confusion and hurt in his 8-year-old eyes. He huddled deeper into the worn blanket, the rough-hewn wooden chair far too big for his small frame. Outside, the wind howled through the ancient trees that surrounded their small mountain settlement, a symphony of mournful groans that mirrored the ache in his heart. He was different, everyone knew it. Found abandoned in the whispering woods, swaddled in nothing but a tattered cloth, he was an enigma, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Yet, within this close-knit tribe, nestled high in the rugged embrace of the Appalachians, he had found a home. Mama Elara, a woman with eyes as warm as the hearth fire and a smile that could chase away any storm, had taken him in without question. "Don't you fret, little one," she used to say, her voice a soothing balm, her calloused hand gently stroking his hair. "You were meant for something special. I just know it. The forest whispers of your destiny, a purpose etched in the stars themselves." Jaden didn't understand then. All he knew was the sting of loneliness, the feeling of being an outsider peering in. The other children, with their boisterous laughter and easy camaraderie, seemed to belong to a world he could only observe from afar. But Mama Elara's unwavering faith, her belief in a grander plan, planted a seed within him. He clung to her words, a fragile hope against the tide of uncertainty. One starlit night, as they sat outside their hut, the fire crackling between them, Mama Elara pointed towards the heavens. "See that constellation there, little one?" she asked, her voice hushed with reverence. "The hunter. He watches over us, protects us from the shadows that lurk in the darkness." Jaden followed her gaze, tracing the celestial pattern with his finger. "There's nothing there, Mama," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. Mama Elara chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. "Not yet, little one," she said, her eyes twinkling with a secret knowledge. "But one day, when the time is right, the darkness will come. And the hunter, he'll need a hand." Her words, cryptic back then, now echoed in his mind with chilling clarity. The darkness she spoke of, it wasn't some abstract concept. He'd seen it, felt its icy touch in the clearing, the monstrous entity drawn to the mark etched onto his skin. Jaden's gaze flickered to the intricate tattoos that snaked across his arm, the lines now pulsing with an unsettling warmth. The whispers of the forest, once dismissed as childish fancies, now screamed of his connection to the very darkness Mama Elara had warned him about. He wasn't just different, he was a beacon, a point of convergence for a terrifying force. But somewhere deep within the fear, a flicker of understanding ignited. Mama Elara's unwavering belief in his purpose, it wasn't some comforting fantasy. He was here for a reason that now felt like a crushing burden. He was born for a higher purpose, yes. But the purpose, the destiny she spoke of, was to become the very thing he was supposed to fight. The weight of this realization settled on him, a suffocating cloak that threatened to steal his breath. Jaden rose from the chair, a new resolve hardening his features. He may have been born under the shadow of darkness, but he wouldn't succumb to it. He would find a way, somehow, to fulfill the purpose he was given, to honor Mama Alara's unwavering faith, even if it meant staring into the abyss and defying his very nature. The memory faded, leaving Jaden staring into the flickering flames. The weight of his past, the terrifying truth of his connection to Naraka, pressed down on him. He could still feel the phantom ache where Mama Alara used to stroke his hair, a bittersweet reminder of a love that transcended even the shadow he now carried. A deep chuckle rumbled across the cabin, shattering the pensive silence. Ellis, looking surprisingly relaxed despite the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, held up a canteen. "Anyone up for some more of this mountain moonshine?" she asked, a playful glint in her eyes. Jaden managed a weak smile. The moonshine, potent as it was, couldn't erase the fear that gnawed at his insides, but it offered a temporary reprieve, a chance to forget the storm brewing on the horizon. The others, weary but resolute, gathered around the fire, accepting the canteen with grateful nods. Despite the gravity of their situation, a camaraderie had formed in this crucible of fear and desperation. The deputy, his name revealed to be Hank, raised the canteen in a mock toast. "Here's to a good old-fashioned monster hunt," he said, a wry grin tugging at his lips. "May the skies open up, the thunder roar, and that sucker fall straight into our little trap." Laughter, tinged with a nervous edge, filled the cabin. It was gallows humor, a way to face the unthinkable by making light of it. They all knew the coming days, the ritual itself, could mean their lives. But tonight, under the soft glow of the fire, they were a team, a family bound by a shared purpose, however horrifying it might be. Jaden looked at Sarah, huddled beside Isaiah, her eyes wide but filled with a newfound determination. He couldn't let her down, couldn't let any of them down. Mama Alara's belief in him, this unlikely family he'd found, it fueled a fire within him, a flicker of hope against the encroaching darkness. As the night deepened, the storm they'd anticipated began gathering force outside. Wind howled through the trees, rain lashed against the cabin walls, and in the distance, thunder rumbled like a giant's growl. The storm mirrored the turmoil within them, a chaotic ballet of fear and grim resolve. Jaden looked at the crude map Isaiah had drawn, the location of the ritual site marked with a shaky X. Tomorrow they would journey to that cursed place, armed with arcane knowledge and a desperate hope. Tomorrow they would face the entity his markings called upon, the embodiment of a darkness he wasn't sure he could resist. But for now, under the fragile safety of the flickering firelight, amidst the nervous laughter and shared fear, a moment of peace held sway. It was the calm before the storm, a fleeting respite before the world they knew might shatter. It was all they had, and in its own way, it was perfect.